Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. This episode, I want to cover a band a little bit later than a lot of the music we've covered. The 80s, modern music in the 80s. But now, Tears for Fears. I admire the hell out of this band. I mean, Tears for Fears, they're an interesting group. We're talking, I got seven records. Not a lot. I mean, from 1983 when they started to last year, was they put out their most recent record, but only seven total. So there was long stretches there where they were pretty inactive, and I don't know. They're hard to pin down. They're kind of mysterious band is the right word, but they're kind of hard to pin down. The always ambitious, sometimes to a fault, but even in their failures, they're always interesting. And when they do knock it out of the park, man, it's something to behold. I really think they're you know from the '80s on one of the most interesting bands. I mean, they are fantastic. Now, basically, I mean, through most of their history, it's two guys, right? Roland Orzabal, who's been there the whole time, and Kurt Smith, his on again, off again musical partner, they've had a contentious relationship at times, but most of the time it's those two guys, and that's where the magic is. There was a period where there were two of these seven records where Kurt Smith is not there, and it's basically Roland Orzabal solo project, but he uses the Tears for Fears moniker. But other than those two, it's really those two guys. The first few albums, first couple albums, they are kind of a full band. I mean, it's those two guys plus Manny Elias and Ian Stanley. Um, but it's really by the third record, it's just Roland and Kurt, right? And then whoever they're hiring to play with them. But I mean, out of the gate, the debut was huge in the UK. Didn't make a huge dent here in the United States, but man, their second record worldwide was massive. And and their third record was incredibly ambitious and had some hits off of it. After that, they've definitely came back down to earth and at times have flown under the radar, but continued to do very interesting work. And again, if you listen to that debut, they start off kind of sounding like a synth pop rock band from that era, but very quickly evolve into something much more, kind of expanding their palette with a lot more sort of organic sounds, electric guitars and all of that, and really just really expand their palette quite a bit. I mean, it was strings and horns and world music touches and all kinds of stuff. Very very experimental. I mean, always very experimental. When you talk about Tears for Fears, you also have to acknowledge they have a serious Beatles complex. Roland Orzabal, especially, I think. A lot of that stuff is Beatles esque, and I mean that as a compliment. We'll talk about it as we get to it, but they echo that a lot. Well, all right, so we got seven records. We're gonna rank worst to best, in my view. There's seven studio records, and then at the end we can talk some live material and compilations and stuff like that. So at number seven, I do have 1995's Raul and the Kings of Spain. Raul and the Kings of Spain. These bottom few I do have on CD, but we'll get to the vinyl here soon. But yeah, this is the second of the two records from the 90s, is 1995, where Kurt Smith is not there, and it's just Roland Orzabal. Basically a Roland Orzabal solo record, but he wanted to use the name Tears for Fears for obvious reasons. He'd sell a lot more. Um, Kurt Smith is missed. The thing with Orzabal and Smith, I, for a long time, I've always just considered it kind of Roland Orzabal's band, and Kurt Smith was, I don't know, just sort of the side guy, like the Oates to his Hall. Um, but that's not the case actually. Uh, One, Orzabal and Smith, to my ears, their vocals sound very similar. So a lot of times I'm assuming it's Orzabal when some of these songs are actually Smith singing. You know, and it's clear because you're going to see this one and then the next one I'm going to talk about are the two where Smith is not there. So it's obviously Orzabal and Smith working together is some sort of spark and magic that isn't there when one of them, Kurt Smith is missing. Yeah, this is the only one that to me is kind of hard to listen to all the way through. I wouldn't call it bad. There's some good songs on there. The title track is good. Sketches of Pain, I think, is good. God's Mistake is interesting. I mean, there's some decent stuff on here, but I told you they've always incredibly ambitious, and they're always kind of on that edge. Usually on the right side of that edge, right side of that line. Here with just Orzabal basically with Roland, he's kind of on the wrong side of that line. It overly ambitious gets to sort of pretentious, and not as many catchy tunes as they usually have. At number 6, I've got the one before that, the other one without Kurt Smith, which is 1993's Elemental. Now, this is to me, this is quite a bit better than Raul and the Kings of Spain. It's not amazing all the way through, but there are some really knockout tracks on here. I think I like the opening title track is really good. Break It Down Again was kind of a hit, and it's still in their set lists. And I think it's the only song in their set lists from these two without Smith, even though Smith is now playing with them again. Break It Down Again is a great song. I mean, it's right up there with their classic hits in quality. And the closer, Good Night Song, I think is beautiful. It's gorgeous, soaring chorus, and yeah. But there's some other stuff on here that's again falls onto the wrong side of that pretentious line. Dog's the best friend's dog, fish out of water, gas giants, yeah, Mr. Pessimist, yeah, some of those. Yeah. All right, from here on out, these last 5, I think, are all excellent records. And they all feature the partnership of of Roland and Kurt. At number 5, I have the one that they released last year, 2022's The Tipping Point. There they are. There's Roland and Kurt as they are today. I like Roland's long gray hair. Just let it hang out, man. It's awesome. And Kurt Smith looks exactly like he did in the 80s. I mean, this doesn't look like any different, really. A little gray on the side there, I guess. Anyway, The Tipping Point. This came out last year. They're actually on tour for this right now. I'm I'm gonna try and go see them in Austin over the summer, but because they're playing there, and this is way better than it has a right to be. Uh, you know, I mean, as far as sort of reunion albums go, they just pick up, and it's really good. I mean, seriously. I mean, the last record before this that they did was 2004. So this is what, like 18 years later, or something like that. But it's excellent, really excellent. Kind of sobering story behind this. The previous record, they'd gotten back together, and it was kind of a good thing, and then just sort of fell apart again. And Roland Orzabal's wife kind of had a prolonged illness. I don't know if it was cancer or something, but kind of this prolonged illness. And Kurt Smith had known his Roland's wife from childhood, so they all they were friendly, and so she eventually passed away, and Roland and Kurt sort of reconnected, and as almost therapy. If you read the history of this band, a lot of it's based on therapy. In fact, their formation is they wanted to put therapy into music. but sort of recovering from the loss of his wife. And again, Kurt Smith knew her from childhood, so they he knew her too. They started writing music together again, and that's sort of the genesis of this record. But anyway, which I think explains why some of these songs are pretty sober and but really good, really good. No Small Thing, No Small. The opening song, No Small Thing, is interesting because it opens with this acoustic guitar, which like is not something you hear much in Tears for Fears music. This is kind of an interesting sound to open with. The title track is really driving and great. Break the Man is just one again. It's sort of in the classic vein of Tears for Fears, right up there with the catchiest of their hits. I think in a different era, it could have been a radio hit. Yeah, Break the Man is fantastic. The highlight though for me is Rivers of Mercy, which is just like stunningly beautiful. Um, Obviously, a song kind of dealing with the death of his wife, but man, it is just beautiful. And it's nice because it goes on for it's like about 6 minutes. So it's a you really get into it and kind of get into this groove, and it just one of those trance sort of songs that'll just take you somewhere. And I mean, bring tears to your eyes. I'm serious. I mean, if you're in the right frame of mind, it's a beautiful song. So yeah, I I I am high on this new record of theirs. I hope they keep putting out some stuff. Number four. Number four is really the I don't know the rediscovery in all this. When I was starting planning to do this video, starting revisiting all these records again. This is the one that really like hit me more than it did ever before. I think it's fantastic, really good, and that's 2004's "Everybody Loves a Happy Ending." And this was after those two records that Orzabal did alone. This is when Kurt Smith returned. There they are. And yeah, eh, just fantastic. Again, in a different time than 2004, I think a lot of these songs would have been huge hits. Um, was it "Call Me Mellow" and "Closest Thing to Heaven" are just like screaming for the radio, maybe in a different era. It's just great songs. The title track is when I talk about the Beatles complex, so Beatles esque. Just bringing in some of those psychedelic elements, and I mean you can tell the influence. They're not trying to hide it, but yeah, man, this is good stuff. What else is good? There's one other song that was pretty. Yeah, "Who Killed Tangerine," pretty Beatles esque too. Yeah, this is the sleeper. This is the one that I have really come to love recently. So everybody loves a happy ending, and that did seem to be the end, obviously, until last year with the tipping point. But we get down to these three. These are the three from the 80s, the three 80s records. And at number three from 1989, I have the hugely ambitious, sometimes overly ambitious "Seeds of Love." Again, very Beatles esque. That title track is the most Beatles esque that they've ever, with, the kind of reverse drum fill in there and the almost sort of "Hey Judish," singing, kind of chanting at the end. Yeah, I don't know the whole thing, the whole thing. But maybe slightly overly ambitious, kind of gets on that other side of that line again. But other parts of this, they really show their stuff. Really show how talented they are. "Seeds of Love" is a great song. "Woman in Chains" is a fantastic song, which features the vocals of Oleta Adams. Now, this was a great story. So they had been on tour, and they were. The story goes, I know Roland was involved, maybe Kurt too, but they just went down to the hotel bar, wherever, whatever city they were in, on their big tour, and there was this great jazz group playing, in the bar, and this woman was singing Oleta Adams, and they just fell in love with her vocals, And so they contacted her and asked her to collaborate on their next record. And but she's more than a backup singer on here. I mean, she like Woman in Chains, like she takes some of the lead lines on there. So she actually becomes a featured singer on here, and her association with Tears for Fears kind of launched a much more high profile career than she had, playing in hotel lounges. so that's kind of a cool story. That's a cool story, and she's awesome. She really adds to this. But yeah, just looking at some of the songs on here, even some of the songs that aren't very well known. Uh, uh, Year of the Knife, I've always really loved. It's got a great groove to it. There's some acoustic guitar in that too. The like a lot of these songs are in the 6 to 7 minute range, and they have multiple sections. Like I said, very ambitious, meticulously put together and produced, but I think a fascinating listen. And more times than not, they get it right. And it's I would call it a near masterpiece. It's not a masterpiece quite, but close. I also picked up the deluxe edition on CD. The thing with Tears for Fears is they always had a lot more songs, like B sides and all that kind of stuff. And so disc two on this has some fantastic material, that didn't make the albums, some B sides and whatnot, and some remixes of the songs. It's worth having if you're a fan of this stuff. Okay, in the number two slot, I've got the first record, the debut, The Hurting. This is like their synth pop record. I mean, this is mostly synthesizers, but even here, like out of the gate on the debut, just some amazing songwriting. Um, in this genre. I mean, of course, Mad World, which had sort of a resurgence later. There was a guy, I think it was I don't know why I'm thinking Donnie Darko soundtrack. I don't know if I'm totally off or not. The editor can look at it, but there was some other artist who did a pretty uh, um, kind of substantial rearrangement of Mad World, and kind of had a hit with it, and that sort of brought attention back to Tears for Fears, and they sort of came back. And I remember hearing some live material. Tears for Fears started to play that rearranged version too, because it's a little more kind of brooding. It's really good, but either version, the original is brilliant too. Pale Shelter is a great song. Memories Fade is great. Change is great. I mean, some amazing hits off of this, and to me it's incredible. Their debut record, they make almost one of the perfect synth pop records of the decade, and then they move on, to kind of evolve their style after the one record. They don't just sit on that, because their number one record for me is the next one, and was their massive hit, Songs from the Big Chair. From, I don't know if I said the Hurting was from '83. This is '85. This was their worldwide hit. This was massive. God, if you were listening to music in 1985, these songs were all over the place. I mean, Everybody Wants to Rule the World to me is like the quintessential '80s song. Like that encapsulates the decade. you know, I mean, just Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Such a great song. Interesting story on that one. That was like a last minute addition. They almost didn't even have that song on there, but they just kind of threw it on there at the last minute. That was a good decision. Um, God, why? This is one of my favorite records. Period. I think this is genius. This is a masterpiece. It's definitely '80s. I mean, you listen to it, it's like, yeah, it's '80s, but it's one of those records that does transcend the era too. I think it's the production is huge. It just feels massive. I mean, opening with Shout, which is has a real interesting arrangement. Kind of, I think it starts on the chorus, which was a little unusual. The Working Hour has that beautiful saxophone intro, which is really interesting. I was looking at the there's two sax players on there, one of which is Mel Collins, and Mel Collins is one of the great, played with King Crimson, of course, one of the greats. But there's another sax player on there, so it's hard for me to tell who's playing what parts. But there's some brilliant sax playing in there. It's got this real moody opening part with the saxophone solo, and then the groove comes in, and then the songs. It's like 2 minutes in, 2 minutes in before the vocals even come in. But God, it's a great song. Then of course, everybody wants to rule the world. Mother's Talk, which is sort of a throwback to more of the sound of the debut, but it's a great single. I Believe is quite beautiful. And then, I mean, masterpiece. Broken, which goes right into Head Over Heels. That is so great. And then closing with Listen, which is really interesting, kind of interesting experimental track. God, this is just greatness. It's greatness. I do have the deluxe edition here of this too, and this is really worth getting if you're a fan of this, because it's got all there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven B sides, and one of those B sides, Pharaohs. I'm just like obsessed with that song. It's mostly instrumental, but it's just real moody and just beautiful song. That's one of those songs that I could just put on repeat over and over. I think is gorgeous. It's just that's a B side. The B sides are a lot more experimental, so you could tell they were really experimenting with a lot of stuff. And on disc two, you got all the 7-inch singles and then the 12-inch singles, all those remixes from the 80s, which is kind of cool. I have it on here on this disc, but I also have it kind of show you how obsessed I was with this record. I've got them all the 12-inch singles here too. Here's Mother's Talk. It's got the 12-inch for Head Over Heels and Broken. Got the 12-inch for Shout here, and I've got the 12-inch for Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I was like, I bought all the 12 inches for all the singles off of here, off of that record. Like in the '80s, I bought them when they were out. Yeah, I can't say enough about that record. That record is genius, absolutely brilliant. One of the best records of the '80s. Period. You get the point that I do love that record. Okay. Well, it's going to wrap up here. Live material. So there is, I downloaded it off iTunes a while back and burned it onto a CD, but I don't have it to show. But they did release an archival show from their songs from the Big Chair tour from '85, live at Massey Hall up in Canada, um, which is great. It's great live stuff. They're real good live band. I mean, these guys can play too. They're really good. In 2006, they released Live in Paris, Secret World, which I think I've streamed, but I don't own. But yeah, and that's where they kind of do that sort of updated, rearranged version of Mad World, which is nice. Now, there's a bunch of compilations. I guess one, it's not a hits comp. It's one of the it's a comp that has most of their, at least up to that point, 1996 when it came out, their B sides and extra tunes and a lot of those just extra songs, called Saturnine, Marshall, and Lunatic. Now I don't have that. Editor can throw it up there, but I mean mainly because a lot of those B sides, and extra tunes are the same things that I have on these deluxe editions. So I have most of those songs. Anyway. What else? What else? And then there's quite a few hits collections out there. I've got two. I've got on CD "Shout," the very best of Tears for Fears, which is good. It's a nice, 17 track to record. I think it goes up through Elemental, and it's got "Good Night Song" on it and "Break It Down Again," which is nice. Kind of latter day stuff. And some stuff that didn't appear on those records, like "Laid So Low," "Tears Roll Down," which was a song they actually I think recorded for a different hits collection, but it's on here too. "New Star," which is a real good song that was from the Threesome soundtrack, so but it wasn't on one of their records. So it's kind of worth searching out. And then I do have this as well. I found this. This is Tears for Fears "Rule the World." Nice double album here. It covers everything up. It was 2017 when this came out, so doesn't include any material from Tipping Point, but other than that, it does. And obviously focuses mostly, I mean, the whole first record is the '80s stuff. Oh, and the side three is also all the '80s stuff, and then yeah, and then side D is like everything else. But, so it does kind of give short shrift to the stuff, the non '80s material, but you know it's a nice compilation too. Well, all right, guys, thanks for listening to me gush about Tears for Fears. I just think they're one of the greats, from that era, from that later era. So, what do you guys think? You guys fans? Let's talk Tears for Fears in the comments. Different ranking, your thoughts on the band, etc., etc. Please do subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. Helps us out. And like the videos. That also helps us out. Hit the bell for notifications so you can find out when we have new material coming out. All the good stuff. All the great stuff. So, yeah, thanks. And we'll see you next time.